Okay. According to the computer, we are live. There's also a live stream on YouTube. But welcome everyone to Good Trouble, a reading and conversation with columnist Tolley Jones. And welcome to those viewing on YouTube. This event is brought to you by Straw Dog Writers Guild, a nonprofit volunteer-run organization serving writers of all kinds in Western Massachusetts and beyond. Whether you are a new writer or an experienced writer, you will find something that interests you in our program. I want to thank Friends Meeting House for hosting us today. My name is Michael Kavala Goldman. I'm a poet and a literary translator and also the chair of the Straw Dog Writers Program Committee. So Voices for Resistance is a series that Straw Dog Writers started in 2016. And it was to bring authors to us who challenge the status quo. Authors who afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. In the past, we have sponsored readings and conversations with luminaries such as Daisy Hernandez, Charles Coe, Martine Espada. And this is our first Voices for Resistance event of 2025. And I am so excited to welcome all of you. Let's see. Before I introduce our guests, a couple of Straw Dog program announcements. So in 2 weeks, Saturday the 29th, from 12:30 to 2, Straw Dog is hosting a free publishing workshop for all kinds of writers at the Northampton Center for the Arts at 33 Hawley. It's free. A panel of writers who've been published in various ways will be there to present their stories and answer any questions you might have about negotiating today's publishing options. We have some other ongoing programs. Every Wednesday, we have a weekly community writing time online, Straw Dog Writes. The second Sunday of every month, we have an online open mic that you're welcome to join. And twice a month, I host poetry critique groups, also online. And then finally, the first Tuesday of every month at 7 o'clock at Forbes Library here in Northampton, upstairs in the Coolidge Library. Oh, 6 o'clock now, sorry. 6 o'clock in the Coolidge Library, first Tuesday of the month. We have a featured reader and an open mic, and if you bring 5 minutes of material, you can join, or just come as a listener. So for more details on all these programs that we run, you can go to the website, Straw Dog Writers, and definitely sign up for the newsletter if you don't get it already. So I'm going to welcome our featured speaker in just a minute, but after Tolley Jones's reading, she's going to be joined in conversation by Heather Jeffrey. Heather is a cornerstone of our local arts community. She serves as the co-director of the Northampton Center for the Arts at 33 Hall. She has decades of experience fostering art as a nonprofit leader and as a multidisciplinary artist herself. We're really fortunate to have Heather in our community. I'm grateful to have her here today to participate in this conversation. So after Tolley's reading and then the conversation with Heather, we'll open to your questions. So please hold them. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our special guest, Tolley Jones. The editorial page of the Daily Hampshire Gazette is a vibrant forum in our community. And among the letters and columns about city government, schools, national policy, and community happenings, we find Tolley Jones's monthly piece on living in the Valley as a Black American woman. To me, her column is essential reading. Her voice is vulnerable, it is confrontational, it is anchored in real, gritty experience, and also tethered to hope for increased solidarity among all of us. She's a powerful writer for resistance, and an important voice in our community. Please welcome Tolley.
I just want to say that I'm honored to be here today. I was very unexpected. I did not expect this at all. The nature of writing a column is that I don't actually often know the impact. So I appreciate all of you being here today for this opportunity to read out the columns. Some people who are listening are my guinea pigs for my columns. I call them up at about 11 o'clock at night when I'm supposed to be submitting my column for publication. I'm like, are you up? Can you hear my, do you want me to read this column to you so I can edit it? But sometimes, a lot of times I wish that I could read them to you in the voice that I'm writing them, and so I appreciate this opportunity. I just want to honor my ancestors who have all channeled their strength and their power and their resilience and their bravery into me to be able to continue to speak out. It's not always, and I'm often afraid, but I am choosing to be brave about it, and so I want to honor them. I brought them here with me because I often write about them so that they are not forgotten. The first column that I am going to read from, I want to very specifically honor my best friend, Kirsten Tamara Kowalski, who died in June a year and a half ago. And she is a primary reason why I have this column to begin with, because a friend here, I don't know where Jackie is. Jackie, right? There's Jackie. Jackie was writing a column when George Floyd was murdered. And Kirsten has always been a person who saw me for who I am, no matter what I was going through. And she brought that energy to the world and opened doors for me because she wanted people to see me the way she always saw me. And so she, when George Floyd was murdered, she called Jackie and said, Jackie, turn over her column to Tolley this month. It's all white people. She didn't even hear her, so she didn't consult me. I did that, and then I was informed that I was writing a column by the two of them. My first column was about covert racism that I experienced in this valley. And it's covert racism by people who are trying to be allies. And so that's my target audience. I don't write for racists. I write for people who are trying to be allies and can't know what it's actually like to walk through a progressive area but still be a person who is not white, walking in these systems that have been established before we got here. And then after that first column I wrote, the response was such that the Gazette offered me my own column, and I've been writing ever since. So this first column I'm reading is a column I wrote a few months after she died. And I think this is a good time to read it because it's a sort of a full circle situation. She's here with me now, and she wanted people to hear, and so I wrote that column to honor her. This column is called The Cadence of My Grief. Since my friend Kirsten suddenly died in June, grief is the cadence to every song I listen to or sing, happy or sad or pensive. It is the concrete that encases my feet as I slog through each and every step I take. It is like the smell of autumn, everywhere, yet intangible and invisible. Yet it stealthily and inexorably crowds out the essence of summer as though it never was. Grief is in the time passing on the clock, and it is in the dates that race up to me, and that are somehow weeks in the past, while the days are loud and slow and empty. Grief seasons every bite of every meal I eat, like an ingredient you know is there but cannot identify. It is tasteless, yet somehow alters the taste of every single morsel. Grief makes me cry every morning when I drive, and grief makes me cry every evening when I drive home from work. And grief is waiting for me at my doorstep when I get home. It lurks around corners and somehow surprises me, even though it is there, always, curled up at the base of my neck like a dead mink. Grief muffles my ears and blurs my eyes and sifts into my lungs so I cannot take a full breath. Grief wakes me in the morning and crawls into bed with me at night. Grief provides the soundtrack for my dreams. Everywhere is my friend, superimposed over the most mundane moments. She is in the gas price at the pump that I want to complain to her about. She is in the leaves that drift down in the October sunshine that I want to see with her. She is in the shoes she gave me. These are them. When I put them on to run to the store. She is in the air fryer that I bought based on conversations we had about how amazing they are. She is in the rug on my living room floor that she bought for me as a housewarming present. And she is in the cup full of chopsticks and metal straws that I borrowed from her years ago that lives on my countertop and that I see every single day. She is in every bite of food I cook for my child, for whom she fought to keep alive, right alongside me for 19 whole years. From the moment she laid eyes on her, newly born and stillborn from my body. She is in my children, whom she helped me raise. She is in every worry I have for them, and she is in every joy they bring to me. She is in the car with me when I sing her favorite Brandy Carlisle song, just like we did in June on the way to Aquinnah to buy bread in a car filled with love. And she is in the dime I find on the ground when I'm missing her. And nowhere is my dearest friend. She is not on the mountaintop next to me to see the clouds so puffy that they look fake. She's not outside next to me, bundled in a blanket at midnight when I see a meteor flare across the sky. She is not with me to help me pick out the perfect wind chime. She is not at the farmer's market with me as I buy too expensive wild honey and wood squares. She is not in my phone in a new long voicemail rant that makes me laugh and that ends with, I miss you and I love you. She is not curled up in her bed with me as we scroll through Instagram, and she is not laughing as I give her a hand massage because she has sacred hands. She is not in the calendar for the days, and weeks, and months, and years stretched out ahead of me, so lonely and dull. And without her laugh and her fierce love of me and of life itself. And she's not with me now when I sing her favorite Brandy Carlisle song, alone, in a car full of sorrow. So, my comments, like a lot of them are about trying to weave in my experiences. I grew up in Enfield, Connecticut. I was born in Buffalo, and my family moved here to Enfield, Connecticut when I was 3. We lived in Enfield, Connecticut until I graduated high school, and then I moved to living with families in Home Meadow, and then I went to college, and then I moved here because I didn't require very money, I stayed here. So here's where I live. And so my whole life has been in New England, in white towns, and white cities, and white schools, I counted up, and it had something like 147 teachers, and only one of them was black. And my whole career started with kindergarten going all the way through college. And so I started working with kids and really thinking about the impact that that had on me and how I think of myself, how I view my skin, my hair, my voice, my experiences, because I've grown up in white-centric areas where like not really, it wasn't intentional, unintentionally, I was molded to believe that white was right. And so this really impacted me, and I've had to spend a lot of time in my adult life on doing that damage. And so a lot of my columns, I try to weave in my experiences now and also how people live a full way so that when you're walking through the world, you can be aware of that impact and try to mitigate it. So one of the columns I wrote was called Good Hair. Good hair, Black people know that good hair is a thing that Black people say amongst themselves, and it is steeped in white culture. It's steeped in slavery, because the whiter you were as a slave, the more likely you were to be a house slave with better perks and better food rather than a field hand. And so that has become assimilated into Black culture unintentionally. And so one of my cousins said that to us, you know, big hair. Said that out loud. I think that, and also, your work, so I wrote this column called Big Hair, specifically about hair, starting with that and talking about my childhood impact and my impact as an adult. Look, girls, my mother whispered to my sister and me, surreptitiously pointing. Ahead of us, a white girl with a long, thick braid, blonde hair reaching to her waistline and strode briskly through the wall. My sister and I watched wistfully as her braid swung loosely back and forth in time with her steps. We watched her and her hair walk all the way down the mall until she disappeared around the corner. This memory takes up space in my mind, and I can still instantly conjure up the envy I felt and how ashamed I felt of my own hair. On another day when I was around the same age, my mother rewarded me for demonstrating efforts in attending to my hair by combing my hair into a soft halo that framed my face and gently fluffed as I moved. I was devastated. I thought I was ugly because no one had ever told me that my hair, as it grew out of my head, was a beautiful crown. I must have looked upset because my mother asked me what was wrong, and when I tearfully said, I don't like it, she exasperated and pulled my hair back into its usual braids. I felt very guilty because I understood that she was trying to do a kind thing for me, but I knew that she was wrong. All she had done was make it uglier than I usually was. And she didn't say anything to me to contradict what I thought. Growing up, no one ever told me I was beautiful or even pretty. No one ever wistfully watched my hair walk down the wall. No one told me my brown skin was perfect, rich, and vibrant in the sunlight, as I see now in pictures of me from long ago. No one complimented the shine of my hair, the thickness of my twists, or the beauty of my eyes, with pupils dark as obsidian. No one explained to me that white people love brown skin so much that they laid out in the sun, damaging their pale, unmelanated skin to try to get closer to the beauty I was naturally born with. No one ever told me I had anything worth envying. I felt ugly for a dishearteningly significant portion of my life. Clothes designed for narrow Caucasian hips strained and unattractively bulged when my curves asserted themselves. My long arms jutted from sleeves inches too short because they were designed for a slight, petite white woman. My rich milk chocolatey skin that glowed with lotion and coconut oil dulled under pastel hues crowded every store makeup rack designed for pale skin and fair tones. Clothing with ill-fitting and garish on me. Makeup and sunscreen left my skin somehow both ashen and greasy at the same time. And my hair, as I've said before in other comments, refused to feather or move when I walked. Michelle Obama checks off many of the boxes into which women in America are taught to fit. She's thin, fit, and obediently wears her hair in straightening styles that complies with the requirement that professional black women in America force their hair into right-looking styles rather than wear their hair in natural styles as it grows out of their head. Yet she was publicly described as an ape in heels and a gorilla face. Serena Williams, who won 23 Grand Slam championships and is the greatest tennis player of all time, was described by countless anonymous online posters as monkey, ape, and a gorilla in a skirt. The online magazine Insider ran an article in August 2022 describing the many ways in which Serena has been mocked, ridiculed, and described as an animal or a man based on her skin and body as a black woman. So is this negative messaging about black women's skin, hair, and bodies being ugly and unattractive really any less damaging to me now that I'm a fully grown adult? After all, only 23 states currently protect a black woman's right to wear her hair the way it naturally grows in natural styles. In all other states, a black woman can be reprimanded, disciplined, or fired for not wearing her hair in a white-approved, white-looking style. Setting aside for a moment the hugely problematic truth that anyone at all will be judged for the way they look, as a female trying to navigate a world that is filled with people who do judge you based on your looks, and as a black woman whose features do not make the social cut, these opinions about Michelle Obama's or Serena Williams' looks are devastating. If Michelle Obama is ugly, then how can I be beautiful with my unstraightened hair, my generous curves, and my inability to do even one push-up? Have you seen her push-ups? The relentless racist messaging and centering of white features as a standard for feminine beauty in America, and the contempt of black skin, hair, and features is made even more insulting by the fact that from the time of slavery until now, white males have held and do hold hypocritical views of black women. Black have been viewed as oversexed and promiscuous, and therefore black women are viewed as sexual objects available for exploitation and casual use. The 1870 census, the first census that included most black people as humans and not property, lists many of my ancestors as mulatto. This means they were blacks per the 1% rule, mixed with white ancestry. The white ancestry was almost universally from coerced relations with white enslavers and other white males with whom my female ancestors were forced into contact. When financially lucrative, black women's bodies were a gold mine. These white male slave owners increased their net worth by impregnating their enslaved black females and added their own children to the list of slave bodies they owned as financial assets. In fact, when Congress passed the act prohibiting importation of slaves, which went into effect on January 1st, 1808, the slave population in this country exploded from 1,191,362 in 1810 to up to 3,953,760 in 1860, a mere 50 years later, in part due to this exploitation of the black female body. As commodities, we black women are apparently irresistible. Yet 200 years later, I, with my brown skin and hair that reflects both the bloodlines of my black ancestors and my white enslaver ancestors, still live in a society that largely cannot look at a beautiful black woman and admit that whole industries exist to make white women's skin look darker, their straight hair curlier, their slim builds more curvy, all features with which I was born. I live in a society that still looks at a black woman through a white lens and sees an ugly gorilla. How am I doing this?
You're doing great.
I mean, I'm trying. Do I have two more here?
Why don't you start with 2 and see how it goes?
So, I did Ancestry.com, like a DNA test. That is one of the consequences of slavery is that we don't know where we come from. So, I did this DNA test and I was able to finally trace back my family by comparing other people's family tree. They connected with DNA matches, and I built my family tree back and I was able to trace it all the way back. farther than anybody had ever done this before, to many people in my family who were enslaved and also upsettingly white enslavers who are also my ancestors. This is very difficult, but also I shared this with my family. And one of the people that I found was named, which is almost unheard of because her names are stolen. The record kept you or not in the census, and so I've written more than one poem about this woman because she was phenomenal, and she is somebody that I think about every day because I'm channeling her power. She's this incredible person. I wish I had known her, and I feel like she's with me. So this column is about, I've written more than one column about my ancestry journey, but also this one is about you. Trying to express what I'm doing with this knowledge in my life. So this column is called Claiming Ownership. 222 years, 7 months, and 7 days ago, my ancestor, Lucia, an enslaved woman and mother of 2 small girls, decided to risk capture, beatings, death, and being sold away from her children to escape her enslaver, her abuser, and to risk everything for the potential of a better life. She decided that the torture of her enslavement and the inevitability of her children's continued suffering was intolerable, and that she was not going to passively accept her assigned role. Her genes were strong. Either she or her parents survived the Middle Passage, a nightmare of disease, terror, inhumanity, and death. She survived repeated rape. She survived whatever severe punishment was likely meted out to her when she was recaptured in her first attempt to flee with her 6-month-old firstborn. She survived the daily, constant degradation, privation, and trauma of enslavement, and instead of accepting inflicted misery as her permanent destiny, she plotted. She planned, she waited, and watched, and she made her next move when the time was right. She and her children made it to freedom. Never again would she be forced to live for the benefit of someone else. Never again would she be forced to cook, clean, serve, and entertain anyone against her will. Never again would her body belong to someone else. Never again would her or her children's futures depend on the whims and retaliations of a man who viewed them as possessions and satellites to his own demands and wishes. Lucia's grandson, John, was born free and lived free in Pennsylvania until he died of typhoid fever in 1854. There is a picture of him looking just like my Uncle David, my mother's brother, and holding a baby who might be my great-great-great-grandmother, Rachel, named after his mother, who was born into slavery but died free. Lucia's 4th great-grandchild is my grandmother, Esther. Grandma was born in 1927 and was 6 years old when the Great Depression began. She and my grandfather raised 5 children, who were all at one point all under the age of 5. That's crazy. Have you met 5-year-olds, by the way? I can't really emphasize that too much. There were 5 kids that she had, all under the age of 5. These facts contributed to why at every family get-together she constantly monitored the whereabouts of her children. Where's Patty? Where's Charles? Even though her children were middle-aged and were not likely to wander off. Her traumas, both experienced and inherited, explains why she was sparing of affection, guarded. She and my grandfather coped with alcohol, stoicism, and grit. Their children were at various points debutantes, college students, police officers, entrepreneurs, musicians, artists, wives, husbands, and parents. All of them are flawed, beautiful, at times ugly. All of them products of generational trauma. Every one of them struggled, their souls in agony. The only one of my grandmother's children still alive is my mother. Her inherited trauma was overrun and reseeded by my father's past and profound trauma, descended from a long line of strong yet fractured people, scrabbling with desperate, broken fingernails to claw a place a little higher for their own children. His trauma filled our house, dictated every facet of my childhood, and became the albatross that my mother nurtures to this day. My parents and the ancestors before them propped up their children with stain and pain and massive boulders that dig straps into shoulders and pulled backwards with the strength of the hands pulling our entire line back to where he thinks we belong. I, too, have suffered. I have added bricks and pieces of my flayed flesh into those sacks beneath me. I have added flasks of tears and hunks of wormwood and nightmares and heartache. But I do not accept the albatross. I cut the straps on the sacks I was given, and I used the strength of the love woven into their very fabric to continue to climb up and up and up. This year is from reweaving those sacks into a warm tent for me and my children to collect light, laughter, and peace. A place just like Lucia fought to get us. The last column I'm going to read, I wrote, which is sad that it's still relevant. I wrote it after Donald Trump was elected, that first time. This one's called Not a Surprise to Me. And I wrote it because a lot of people are like, it's like, now, you're like, see what's coming. You've been paying attention. It's because lots of people, white people, were surprised that he was elected and like, what? How could we have seen this coming? This column was written in response to me encountering that sentiment with lots of white people at different years. Not a surprise to me. I'm not surprised at all that nearly half this country has doubled down on support for Donald Trump and his policies and the deleterious impact he has had on our country. This is the country that made it constitutionally legal for my ancestors to be imported, as long as the government was duly compensated. This is the country where the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery wasn't ratified by Mississippi until 2013. This is the country where, in the year 2020, over 32% of people in Nebraska still voted against removing legal slavery from their state constitution. This is the country where men in red and blue homespun cloth roped my black-skinned grandmothers with faces like mine into seasoned iron chains of body and soul that stretched my front door. This is the country where the soil is stained by the sweat and blood of my grandfathers, whose flesh was torn by whips eagerly wielded by the grandfathers of those who fly flags on their pickups and spit and pledge their allegiance to my continued oppression. This is the country where my grandmother's frantic bloody feet soaked into the thirsty stolen ground, because the self-serving laws crafted by her captors said that the raped belonged to the rapist. This is the country populated by white-hued bigots who shrouded America's murder and abuse and greed in biblical entitlement and launched a permanent crusade to weave the tenets of oppression into the hooded fabric of its core. This is the country where lily white mothers with angry eyes in ironed pantsuits shriek malevolent and spit-flecked accusations at brown children daring to be equal. And alabaster grandmothers with contempt-curled lips and salon hair hiss at a child. And where those lily white mothers taught their sons and their daughters at their knees to continue the cultured hatred so that I today will know my place. And young men with hatred-colored skin screamed, enraged, and plotted. This is the country where a murdered brown baby, beaten and bloated and rotten, is still unavenged. Where a woman was murdered while she slept and then lies forgotten in her blood-soaked sheets, while oppression-skinned professionals and armchair crusaders read and flushed with the excitement of the subtleties of extermination, funnel their hypocritical outrage at a black man standing his ground. But this is not his ground. This is the country where gluttonous, privilege-colored, blue-handed plunderers remain exalted and revered. This is the country where a Janus-faced puppeteer sits among his gilded decay and sifts the burnt fragments of the tainted Constitution over complicit and willing volunteer patsies. This is the country where my family dreads the growing certainty of being inexorably ground to death between the fear-tipped boots of hypocritical proclaimers of liberty, because we are already dead and buried under centuries of slave-owned soil. This is the country where those who have never had a court case decide their rights cheer on and vote in the liars, the rapists, the thieves, the kidnappers, the captors, the charlatans, the bigots, the racists, and the killers. And with joy and sinister pleasure embrace those who will enshrine my oppression into law, or proclaim that none of it matters. This is always been the America I have lived in, where the one thing guaranteed to unite white people is the gleeful and avaricious appetite for oppression.
Thank you. Whenever you're ready.
Sure. I was originally going to start with, how did you end up with this column?
Hold on a second. I'm gonna try to pour this, and I don't have it. I don't want to
I
embarrass
just heard a
myself.
call for a microphone.
I can't hear. I'm sure we have microphones. 11 minutes.
Please come in and have a seat. Sorry.
So I was saying that I was going to ask you, how did you come to do this column? And that's kind of how you started tonight. but I wanted to check in and see if there's anything else you wanted to add to that.
Yes, I'm always an overachiever, so I answered that question before you asked it. No, it was right around the time of George Floyd, and there was a lot of unrest, and, my first column, was called, I think it was called, The Valley's Covert Racism, or something like that, but it was really about the fact that I'm in danger here on a regular basis, and I think that was very shocking to people who are used to growing up in Massachusetts and in this area where it seems safe, and we kind of, hey, we saw racism, cool. Like, and so being able to write about how there's this extra layer of experience that a lot of people aren't aware of, really tied into the response that I think the Gazette got. And so they offered me a column, in part also because they don't have any other Black writers. So this is they can say they're diverse now.
The one makes them diverse.
Start.
It's a start. I wanted to ask next, what challenges have you faced in maintaining in regularity writing a column like this? How long have you been doing it now?
This would be, actually, I think, was that in the summer of 2020? Yeah, so it's going on 5 years. I counted out how many columns I'd written, and I was shocked. The challenges are that, the topics that come up are incredibly personal. I'm just at my phone here because I have some notes. These are really personal a lot of the times, almost all the time. It's very taxing. It's a process. So when I'm writing the column, I start thinking about topics, or I start thinking about things that are showing up in my life, and I kind of make a mental note and I take notes on that. But the writing process requires me to lower a barrier that I keep in place in order to exist in a racist world. I need to be able to go to the store and do what I need to do. I need to be able to go to my job and succeed. I need to care for my kids. I need to be able to just do things. And I've developed, like many Black Americans, I've developed a barrier, and I can choose when I lower that barrier and interact with these topics. To write the column, I have to willingly drop that barrier, and I don't just write it in one day. I'm thinking about it. So as my publication date approaches for the column, that's a lot of days of mulling over a topic that I think I'm going to write about. It costs me quite a bit. The recovery period is long. And so if you ever see that there are gaps in, like there's a month where I don't write, that's usually a mental health break, because I can't bring myself to write another column and I need to take a break. So, it is difficult, but it's a choice that I've made because I think it's important.
Again, thank you. In reading and preparing for this interview, there are a couple of columns in specific that I really wanted to ask you about. And in your column, Be the Rainbow in Someone Else's Cloud, you discuss feelings of loneliness. How do you balance vulnerability and exposing yourself with a desire to convey a message to your readers?
As I've gotten older, I care less and less about what anybody else thinks, which is just really great. It's very refreshing. I can't wait until I care less. I don't care much about the vulnerability in sharing that. I don't know if that makes me unique or something, that it doesn't bother me to do that. And it comes from a place of being raised with some, repressive religion and in places in New England where nobody talks about their feelings. And those things combined have led to me being ready. Like I want to talk about these things because I've been watching the impact of people not talking about their feelings. And people think that you're supposed to protect other people from their feelings, and what happens is everyone's walking around in these little isolated bubbles of trauma, and that's not necessary because we have community in order to share those things. So I think it's important. The other thing is that I write my columns with this lens that I learned about. I work with children and support children and parents in early literacy skills and being able to build up capacity for being the parents they want based on building on their skills and their own parent strengths. And there is a woman, a Black woman named Dr. Rudy Sims Bishop, and she wrote a paper about the importance of multiculturalism in children's books. And the concept that she coined the term windows and mirrors. And the concept is that it's very important that children be exposed to books that not only allow them to have a mirror put up to them so that they can see their own experience reflected. And then they also need to be able to have a book that has a windows that allows them to see through into somebody else's experience. And so I'm in charge of a playroom, and I buy the books for the playroom, and when you walk in, you'll see that there's books with brown children, books with kids with different abilities, and there's a book with a kid with one leg, and there's a book with a kid with a cane, and the toys are diverse. And the reason is that it's important that kids walk into a playroom and see a book that looks like them. And it's important also because the playroom that I have is in the middle of a white town, that those white kids come in and see that their experience is not universal. And I, in my own head, call this my anti-genocide playroom because I can't say that out loud because there is an HR and I don't want somebody to write Julie about this. But it's important because all of these kids are going to grow up and have to decide if they're going to participate in a genocide. They have to decide who they're going to vote for and why. And this may be the only time that they are exposed to the idea that somebody else's experience is out there. And so I write my columns with the same idea. My columns have kind of like three goals. One is I'm trying to explain my experience to somebody who really wants to know, but can't know because they aren't living, they're not walking in my shoes. I also want somebody who is living my experience to be seen, especially since I'm writing as a Black woman and this is a very white area. We are scattered, Black people are very scattered in this area, and it's hard to build up a community. And so I want to be able to write a column where somebody says, yes, that's how I feel. Finally, a yes. And then, but also as a Black woman, I'm walking in these areas and the people who are my friends and my allies and my peers and are wanting to be the strong ally to be able to fight for me, they need to know what they're fighting. And they can't know it because they grew up here or they're living here and not knowing what happens when I go to CVS and somebody appears to straighten the shelves next to me because I was lingering too long in the Northampton CVS, and what that does to me. Because I'm not gonna go and you're not gonna believe what happened because my Black friends are like, I believe that. And so you don't see those experiences if you're not with me. And so the other purpose is so that Black people feel seen. And then, and I want the people who read my columns to be able to go back to their communities, and if there are brown people there, I want them to be thinking, what are we doing that might be making this person uncomfortable, and do something on their own without expecting that Black person to tell them. So, I don't know what the question was, but I hope I answered it.
That's fine. Okay. In pieces like a parent's grief, you convey profound emotion, as you do in most of your pieces, as we've seen. What is your process, or do you have a process you can recommend for channeling personal grief and trauma into or through one's writing?
I have always written. I've always been a writer since I was very young. And I use journaling to be able to have a place to put things, because my friends know I talk a lot. And there isn't always somebody who's there to hear what I have to say, and not always in a place to hear it. And so I write down these things. And a lot of times I don't know what I want to write about because the feeling is so large and amorphous. And so when I'm writing, I start where I start. It can be very overwhelming if you're thinking, I'm going to sit down today and write a book. Sit down to that blank page and you write 2 words and delete it, and you go get some coffee, and then you sit down and you're like, I haven't organized these books in a long time. And then you're like, you know what, this seems like a tomorrow job. Or is that just me? I'm sorry. Just living in my life a little bit. But what I often do is I start with a scene, or I start with the middle of what I want to write. So, for instance, I was writing down an example here of something that I did. So my grandmother died a year ago in November, and I was there for 4 days by her bedside. This was profound for me. I never watched somebody die before. And I didn't leave her bedside for 4 days. And there's a lot of things that happened during that time. I played music for her, I sang, my cousins came. We definitely had some KFC around her. I might have spilled mashed potatoes on her pillow. Sorry. But during that experience, when I was by myself with my grandmother, I found myself looking at her hands. I was holding her hands. And I was looking at her hands, and they're just these beautiful, beautiful hands with these long fingers and perfect nails. And her skin was so soft. And I found myself thinking about the fact that they looked like my hands. And then I found myself thinking about when I was small, I used to sit in the kitchen and watch my mother do things. So I'd watch her cook, or I'd watch her, she was a cake decorator, so I would watch her decorating a cake, or I'd watch her chopping vegetables, and I was just fascinated by watching her hands. And these were the same hands. My grandmother's hands were my mom's hands, and they were my hands. And then I was thinking about the fact that my kids have these same hands. And so when I went home after my grandmother died, there was a lot of big feelings, and I've written a few poems about them. But what I started writing about sitting there and holding her hand. That was the moment that I wrote, and then I built up a whole story about that. And then it led to writing a youth portrait that I wrote in the column I read today, and then I wrote about her trauma. But it really started from being able to start somewhere in this moment that I had to process in some way. And in writing that scene, it created a link to these other things that I wanted to say about her. So my recommendation is simply be brave enough to start in the middle and to not finish. So if you look through my Google Docs, I have like maybe 200 one paragraph or one sentence snippets. And so when I'm trying to figure out something to write, I'll often go through and read them like, oh, that was actually a good line. Or, oh, I forgot I was writing about my grandma Gussie. And so that's really the process that I use, but it can be cathartic to start somewhere and to just put down that emotion and figure out, like, pin it down to something tangible that you can write about.
So I'm gonna go a little off of the questions that I had established. I know, right? The people I come from,
It's okay.
the people I come from say that memory is held in the hands. And so as you were talking, this made me think of that. And also, before I thought of that, I was thinking about, I was wondering, as an artist myself and who I am, I wonder if she writes with, like, on paper, does she use a computer? And then you mentioned Google Docs, but do you go back and forth? Where do you start? And what is, like, what are those hands doing? Are they on a keyboard? Are they holding a pen?
Because I'm required to submit these things electronically, because I do not have a carrier pigeon, I do use Google Docs. And, but my mother, a couple of years ago for Christmas, she gifted me a fountain pen. I've never had a nice pen before because I didn't remember they existed, so. Also, I'm disorganized, so I just find like a marker. So that, except for my kids, doesn't even work. But she gifted me this fountain pen and she said, you're an artist and your writing is your art. And you deserve to be writing with a very good tool. And I gotta tell you, this pen is amazing. As soon as, you have one?
Doesn't matter.
So, and she also gifted me a journal. And so I got flipped over the page and I uncapped the pen and I started writing it instantly. I was a Victorian art authoress. And I was like, in my own Victorian house, the wind was blowing through my hair. My hair was moving in this. Yeah. You can reread the column about trauma about that and figure out why that's a thing. But, so a lot of times I will write with that pen because there is something, it's almost like the difference between, during the pandemic, I broke down and bought a Kindle, so that I could read and take out library books electronically. I'm really bad at returning books, and the whole process during the pandemic of like telling them what book you wanted and then driving to the secret drop off at the end of the driveway that's in like a biohazard thing, and then all that, and then I was gonna have to bring it back. That was never gonna happen. So I bought a Kindle and it's great. I can be reading like 20 different books at the same time in this one thing. But I need real books to be able to feel them and to be able to smell them, and there's something about the paper and the way the words are that's different than the Kindle. And I can see the benefits of both. But when I'm writing with a pen on good paper, there's something visceral that happens that allows me to tap into that kind of writing that is so personal. I will eventually transfer whatever I write into a Google Doc and tighten it up and write it and things, but I have, at this point, I have maybe 5 various writing things, like you see this one. My job somehow has this great bling that they give you that's just this thing with a pen holder. And so I have these stashed others in my car, they're in my bag. If I'm waiting for somebody to be done with something and I'm in my car, I will write, I have one at work. But there's that handheld writing that winds up being the thing that sometimes it's that little bump that I need to be able to figure out what it is that I'm trying to say or what I need to say.
That leads to my next question. Okay. You talked about your insights, and I'm wondering, when you're writing or as you're beginning to write, are there times when it feels like they are just as much what's coming through that pen as your voice, or if not even more so, that it's their story that you might not even have actual knowledge of, but it's coming through?
Absolutely. Yes. I, at my house, I think I wrote about this in one of my comments, I have an altar at my house, and on there is my Aunt Valerie, my grandma, I have a braid of my grandmother's hair on it. I have a picture of my friend, Kirsten. I have all the dimes that I've found since she died that have been very strange places. And when I'm writing a column, my process, especially if it's a topic like that, I light my altar and I call them to me, so that I can speak the words that need to be spoken. And I invite them to be around me so that I say the right thing that needs to be said. And they follow me. I can feel them. And Maya Angelou once talked about this, and she said that whenever she goes someplace, if she's doing a speech or if she's doing something, she says she calls all the people who have ever loved her to come with her, and she never walks into these places alone. And she says, so when you walk into a place, if you do this, the people will feel this energy that precedes you, and it's because those people and their energy is always with you. And that really struck me, because I feel that. I often do that before, especially nowadays, like post-January. I do this to go to work. I do this when I'm walking out in the world. But there have been times, there was one column, and I wish I could remember which one it was, but I woke up with the column fully written in my head, and I hadn't gotten up, and I just opened up my notes app and I wrote down the entire column that I must have dreamed. And it was a personal one about my ancestors. So they are definitely with me. I feel that the strength that I have to be able to speak up comes from them, because Lucia, she ran away when that baby was 6 months old and she was recaptured. And I've seen the runaway slave notices, I saw the recapture notice, and she was returned to her enslaver. And the second time the baby, Rachel, was 6 months old. When she was recaptured, Rachel was 7 years old. And her second baby was there. And she ran 90 miles and made it to freedom. And I think, she went back. And then she stayed there for 7 years, making her plan, and she still ran away. And then she stayed away, had more kids, got established, and all of us from then on were free in that line. And so that's power. That is power. And she brought that power with her to this country and kept them with her. And so when I call upon her, I'm calling on that line of strength that goes all the way back to the country that I don't know. We don't know what country she came from in Africa. But they sit with me and they write with me and they help me so that I can do my work.
Will you say your name for us one more time?
Her name is Lucia.
I want to know if you've gotten much feedback about your columns and the impact they've had in the community and what that's done like for you.
It's a little bit strange because I often forget that I write a column that people read. And so then I'll just be out and be like, why are you talking to me? I mean, thank you. It's just a little weird. So I tell people I'm like locally famous in like 4 towns that most people in the world don't know exist. I do get letters that get sent to me, either right to the Gazette, and they'll send me. I kind of wonder if they filter out negative ones. They haven't sent me horribly negative ones, but if you want to have a little fun read, you can go to the Gazette Facebook page, because they will often post my columns there. And there's a lot of responses that are very negative there. I kind of find it fun. Like the last column I wrote, I happened to realize that they had posted it there, and I read through it, and one person's like, "This is why I don't read the Gazette." And I'm like, "Sir, you're on the Gazette page. You have to go out of your way to go to Facebook and then go Google like Like, where's the Gazette? Okay, now I'm gonna go through and get that. Okay, now I clicked on the link and then I read the whole thing, and I clicked on the comments, and then I had to like update my app, and then I wrote it down. I'm like, I never read the Gazette. I'm like, that's interesting way of saying how I read the Gazette. But people will tell me that they enjoy my column. I've gotten some really interesting responses. There was one guy that took the time to write to me to inform me that my anger at what was done to my ancestors is, quote, worse than anything any of your slave owners ever did to any of your ancestors. Which I found surprising, because I was like, sir, do you know what slavery is? Like, did you read my columns? I feel like you did. But he went out of his way to tell me this, so I had to write a column about that. And then he wrote me again, and he said, I knew that's how you, and I just blocked him. I didn't read the whole thing. But, and then my most fun feedback, somebody slid into my DMs on Facebook, and I clicked in, and all he wrote was, you low-life racist piece of shit. But he had spelled peace, P-I-E-C, P-E-A-C-E. So I was looking at it, and I was like, okay, cool, let me just Google. So I looked on Facebook, I looked up his profile, and he went to Robert E. Lee High School in Alabama. And I was like, well, that's all I need to know. So then I thought, usually I don't care about the negative impacts or feedback. So usually I ignore, but I had time that day. So I thought about it. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna ruin his life. And so what I did is I replied with just an asterisk, and I wrote P-I-E-C-E, and I just sent him a grade, I just spell checked him. And then I just waited until I saw the talkie bubbles, like the typing bubbles, and then I blocked him. So he could never respond, and that was the greatest high I've ever had in my life. And I think about that all the time. And I know, and the reason why I like it is actually, first of all, he's in Alabama. How did he read my column? So this is important to me because, as you said, I don't know the impact. This is just a column I write out and it goes out into the void. I never know who's gonna read it. I don't know who my audience is. I assume it's gonna be you all and maybe a couple other people that you sent it to. But he was in Alabama, and obviously he thinks I'm a low-life racist piece of shit. So he read my column and he can't unread it. And so that pleases me because, first of all, it means that my scope is wider than I thought. And then also, I know that when he's like driving down the road, just popping on to his, I don't know, country music or his trashy music or whatever he's listening to, and then suddenly he just I pop into his head and he's like, oh! And then he's there like at home, like, I don't know, like just trying to sleep, and he was just thinking about all the cool racist stuff he did that day, and he was like drifting off, and then he just was like, oh, she corrected my spelling, like a literal, and I just know that I live rent-free in his house forever in his head. It's just, it pleases me to no end. But mostly I just get people who tell me that they appreciated it. I did actually get an email from a Black man who read my column about Black women rising, and I was writing about this day that I was in my office, and I work in a place that is very diverse. The office has mostly brown people. And I was in my office with the door closed, writing a report, and suddenly this laughter just exploded in the hallway. It was loud and it was joyous, and it was my brown coworkers. And I started thinking, because I have ADHD and I get distracted, so I clicked over and started writing a column about the joy of hearing brown women being themselves, because I've been silenced everywhere I've been. I'm too loud, I laugh too loud, I talk too much, I my opinions are too loud, and to be able to hear that meant so much to me. So I wrote this column about how that felt to me and how important that was. And this Black man wrote me, and he said he vastly appreciated this, and he sent it to his grown Black daughter. And the Black daughter shared it with all of her family, and they were at a family get together, and they all talked about this column and how important it was. And so that's the other audience that I talk about. And so, yeah, so what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of people who like me, and there's some people who do not appreciate my viewpoint, which I like.
Well, that brings me to my last question. So the digital world, as you were saying, people find you. I stalked you a little when Michael asked me to do this, as fair, a good interviewer should. And I came across something from your column that had been lifted out and kind of put by a photo of you, and I really wanted to ask you about this. So it's a quote from your writing, and it says, "I have been told, just like you just said, that I am too much throughout my life. I suppose I agree with this assessment, but I conversely have always looked around me and felt deeply that the people around me were not enough." How has this perspective shaped your writing, and do you find yourself softening or doubling down on that stance depending on the topic?
Well, my supervisor will tell you that I bring a certain "why are we doing this" energy to everything I do that nobody appreciates. And I double down on that kind of energy. So I do think that I have been told that I am too much since I was young. I'm too much. I find it difficult to back down from important topics that I feel strongly about. I am not easily dislodged. I'm not easily dissuaded. And I spend a lot of time thinking of these things, and so I have a large vision that sometimes people don't know I have. But it doesn't really fit nicely into quiet spaces, and my opinions are not comfortable sometimes. And but I have decided, I made a choice that this is what I'm doing. I'm writing, and I'm being a person who speaks up. And as I said, I channel Lucia, who was put in a box and was told that this is your life. And she refused to accept that those were the boundaries that she was given. And she spoke with her feet. And it made a huge impact on so many people. And I was talking to my daughter a couple of weeks ago, who's unfortunately a poli-sci major in college and is really struggling. And I was trying to tell her that she feels that her work is in vain and that she's not doing enough. And I said, you don't know the impact of your presence in the world. You don't know what things you say and how that lands with a person and what they do with that information and how that impacts the person that they meet and what they say and how they participate in those meetings you aren't in, and how there's a ripple effect of all the things that you do when you're walking through the world with intention. And so I double down. I don't care. I find myself invigorated by somebody who's going to tell me that I'm not supposed to be angry about freaking slavery. I'm not supposed to be angry that my ancestors were enslaved and on property rolls as animals and furniture, and that they were stolen, and that this has had an impact, and that it impacts me, and it impacts my children, and it impacts where I grew up, and what schools I went to, and how much money I have, and whether or not I can afford a house, and whether or not my kids will be able to afford a house. And then this white man who's gonna tell me to be quiet and to stop, not even to stop writing, but to stop being mad. Like, how dare you, sir? And so that makes, I doubled down. I wrote, I'm like, well, now I'm writing about you. Now that I'm and my motto is mostly, if I'm uncomfortable, now we're all gonna be uncomfortable. I feel that because I feel that this is my calling. I feel that I have the ability, I was gifted this writing ability. And I was gifted my life. I was gifted my life by Lucia and the other nameless enslaved people who survived and persevered and worked. And despite the burden of generational trauma, my grandparents, my parents, I am required by that debt to pay it back by continuing to do what I can to make the world better for my kids and for everybody else. And this is my gift that I was given to use as a tool. It's scary. I feel like there's a target on me now. I'm in great danger, but I'm not going to stop talking because this is live stream, so I can't really swear, but like, I don't care. And the more uncomfortable I make people who need to be uncomfortable, the more I know that I'm doing my job. And I'm never going to back down because no one tells me anymore in my life to be quiet. And they can try to come up to where I am and speak.
Yeah.
So we have about 10 minutes. If anybody has any questions they'd like to ask Tolley or Heather, this would be the time for that. What an amazing conversation to be witness to. Thank you both. Yeah, Becky, go ahead.
So thank you for choosing courage over fear. And I love the thought of you having free rent in of that guy. So I'm white. I have white ancestors who probably have done some shit. And I think about my life is in some ways of trying to redeem some of their lives, to do it differently, imperfectly, but differently. And so I'm curious about how you hold your white ancestry yourself.
It's very difficult. And I still haven't really come to peace with that because obviously that means that they're related to me and I also am part of that line. I don't claim it, but I can't deny it. It's very difficult. My mother said, because when I was doing the research and traced it back to Lucia, and the way you trace your lineage is you also have to trace your enslavers' history, because they're the ones that have the Bibles and the documents and all the things that my Black ancestors didn't have. And so as I did that, I found the church that he founded that still has plaques on the wall with his name. And he was a Revolutionary War veteran, and so I saw his grave. You can go find a grave, and I saw his grave, and there are flags on there and saying, "Wow, great job, you fought for our country." It is difficult because when I saw the pictures, I saw pictures of Lucia's grandson and his family, and that's the one that I described, and they look like my family. I sent the picture actually to my mother, and I said, what do you think of this picture? She's like, why do you have a picture of my brother wearing a bowler hat? Like, but if you look at that picture, all of the children and her son all have straight hair because they are half white. And so this is something that I wrestled with. I can't do anything about it, and nobody can do anything about it. Who you are, all you can do is to make decisions about how you are now. But none of my columns are meant to make people feel bad about themselves, because you are just who you are. You were born how you were born. What matters is what you do when you know better. And Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better. And so that's what I'm hoping to provide is, and for myself as well, because I wrestle with growing up in the same systems that are only perpetuated by all of us, including brown people. We're all participating unknowingly in these systems. And so all I can say is, when you know better, do better. And you don't have to claim the negative things people did. You can go claim the things that are strengths. Because if you are somebody who are the way you are, that means that somebody in your line passed that down to you. And that's the part I claim. I choose not to claim him.
Go ahead, Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you. You're an extraordinary writer with an extraordinary voice. I'm really grateful to be part of your whole. Who are you reading? And who have you read? Who is giving you the juice or the essence, the core of your voice? And what journalists are you reading today? What do you mine in order to continue?
My parents discovered that I could read when I was 3 years old. They didn't teach me. I think anxiously thought I was supposed to learn. So I did. And so, and I immediately was a voracious reader. My biggest challenge is downsizing books in my house. It's like giving away my children. And so I can't even begin to really pinpoint who has influenced me. I would say that I used to read a lot of historical fiction as a child. I have referenced, like I used to, for a very long time, I went through an Oregon Trail phase, where I just spent a lot of summers and days walking back and forth across my backyard, trying to survive the Oregon Trail. And so I think that I've always been a person who, when I'm reading somebody else's story, I'm in that story. It's what I love about reading. If I'm reading a book, I'm in that book, and if I don't finish it, and I read very voraciously, I will read a lot of books in a weekend if I let myself have that time. But while I'm reading a book, especially if it's a book like that that's telling a story, I'm in that story, and I'm not actually in the real world. So I might be talking to you, but I'm in that book until I'm done with that book. And so that capacity, I think, has been one of the things that, in general, no matter what I'm reading, I'm able to absorb and personalize the experience that the person is having. And I think that comes out in the way I write too, because I want to be able to convey how I feel to people in a way that evokes that feeling in you. During the pandemic, I read a lot of books. I read The Sum of Us by Heather McGhee, which is a book talking about why do white people vote against their own interests all the time. And she had that question. She wrote this fantastic book explaining why white people in America generally go along with the programming that they have that's based on the fact that this country was built on a zero-sum game, which means that white people can only succeed at the backs of other people that they have stepped on. And so that's built into the fabric of this country, the DNA of our country, the continued processes. And so this book was really very pivotal in me being able to articulate some of the things as I'm breaking apart these systems and trying to explain how my moving through these systems impacts me and how that counterpoint against white people moving through those same systems, you have to understand the systems in order to be able to talk about them. And so I read that book and I read several others during that time, and I have this policy where I'll get a book, because I'm not rich, I'll get a book on the Kindle, and if I like it, then I reward myself by getting a hard copy of it. So I have a whole shelf of books that I got during that time. But there were also pivotal writers, like I mentioned Maya Angelou a lot, also Toni Morrison, and there's a lot more, but these are the ones that like popped out. Toni Morrison, when she writes, she chooses every single word with great care. Like every word matters, and that is the way I write. There's no unintentional word, and this causes some tension with my editor. Because I'm like, oh, I just changed. I'm like, you did what? I ruined it. Forgot I don't want to write this anymore. I have to be a little bit flexible, but like there's intentionality with the way I juxtapose words and the choices that I make. And that style came out of Toni Morrison. I went to Smith, and Toni Morrison, when Ruth Simmons became the president at Smith, Toni Morrison came. We had this event, and so Toni Morrison read to us from Paradise, which hadn't been published yet. And she read to us from her manuscript, and listening to her read from that was just profound. Because she read it in a way that you could tell that each of those words mattered. And so I emulate this when I'm writing in order to make sure that there's intentionality, which is why I'm so exhausted after I'm done writing that. I hope that answers your question.
Is there one more question out in the group? Okay, so last question, and then we'll wrap things up.
Given that you share so much of yourself and you have to recoup, as you say, like what do you do to fill your cup so that you can come back even stronger and still authentic to yourself?
A drink. I'm kidding, I've never been that good. I listen to a lot of Black music. Actually, when I'm writing my columns, I often will listen to spirituals that connect me to my ancestors while I'm writing it as kind of like a talisman. And then afterward, I write, as I'm listening to this music, I write for myself. I also do a lot of unplugging. I learned this a long time ago that I require a lot of downtime because, as I said, I'm a lot for myself. There's just a lot going on. And so I really try to make sure to honor the fact that there needs to be rest in order to be able to gather my strength for the rest of the work. And so I allow myself a lot of rest. I do fun things, I hang out with friends, but ultimately between music and solitude, where I just am not requiring myself to do anything, those are the ways that I make sure I don't burn myself out.
When is the book coming out?
It hadn't quite occurred to me well, it's not true. I always am like, you should write a book. And people are like, you should write a book. I'm like, yeah, but that's just like this big, write a book. And there's a lot of steps involved. So I'm in the process of trying to transfer. Writing columns are very different than writing longer pieces. So I figured I'd start with trying to compile those into essays to be able to publish. But I also have started working on like an autobiography. It's just that I don't think anybody would believe it And also, I'm gonna have to call some things, because I'm not even that old, and a lot of things have happened. So that have to be like volume 1, the early years. Volume 2, from 2020 to 2025, that's like 3 books right there. So, stay tuned.
Thank you, everyone, for coming to the program today. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Tolley. Check out other Straw Dog programs and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
There's a sign-up list outside if you want to tell them for signing up for the newsletter.
To sign up for the Straw Dog newsletter, there's a page outside the door.